Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on a pretty fascinating journey. We're digging into a document that, well, it really challenges how you might think about things.
That's right.
We're looking at this unique report. One of you actually shared it with us, and it could sort of reshape views on history, geology, even what's literally happening under our feet.
hmm
Our goal here is just to pull out the most interesting bits, understand the claims, and I think you're in for some surprising connections.
Yeah, definitely unconventional.
Okay.
The core source today is a report from a specific branch of the Russian Ministry of Defense. They call it the SFMRD, and
SF.
Strategic Military Research Department. And, well, this document makes some claims that are pretty out there. Our job is just to explore what the report says, look at their data, their interpretations, and see what we can understand from it, no matter how extraordinary it sounds.
And extraordinary is the word. I mean, the main idea involves an ancient crystalline structure,
Right.
a race of giants, and this huge rethink of U.S. geography. It's quite something.
It is indeed.
Okay, so let's start where the report starts. With this central warning, it talks about a new national security threat right in the American heartland.
Yeah.
And it describes this threat as an ancient crystalline structure. It says it was made by giants from an island called Atlantis, and now it's trying to rise again.
And the report gets surprisingly specific right away. It states that on September 3rd, precisely at 03:03 GMT, this Russian satellite, Cosmos 2499,
Cosmos 2499. Okay.
it detected what they call a massive piezoelectric discharge event. And it wasn't small. It apparently spanned a huge chunk of North America.
How huge are we talking?
Well, according to the report, the eastern border ran along the Wyoming-Cheyenne Belt, the High Plains, Colorado Plateau. Westward, it covered the Snake River Plain, the Basin and Range Province,
Wow.
and north-south. It supposedly stretched from parts of northern Alaska all the way down into southern Mexico.
That is just vast. And the report links this discharge event to things happening on the ground.
It does. It claims this huge discharge happened basically simultaneously with a 5.3 magnitude earthquake in Idaho. That was September 2nd, around 18:00 US 7 GMT.
Right.
And that quake, the report says, set off an earthquake swarm that then moved into Utah.
Okay, so one event triggers another, and then...
And then, this is where it gets really interesting. The report describes what it calls a continuing spiral of other piezoelectric events, a whole sequence.
Like what?
Okay, so 2 days after the Idaho quake, September 5th, a U.S. fighter jet mysteriously crashes in Nevada.
Mysterious crash.
And the next day, September 6th, 2 more U.S. fighter jets mysteriously crash, also in Nevada.
Few more. Huh.
Then, September 7th, Mexico gets hit by a massive 8.1 magnitude earthquake, and importantly, the report notes it was accompanied by mysterious lights.
Lights in the sky during an earthquake.
That's what it claims. Then, September 9th, mysterious flashes of light seen over Los Angeles, September 11th. Strange, bizarre windstorms hit San Francisco.
It's just wind.
Bizarre windstorms, it says. Followed on September 12th by a massive electrical storm over San Francisco.
Okay, electrical storm makes a bit more sense with the piezoelectric idea, maybe.
Possibly how they connect it. And the sequence they list culminates on September 16th with a mysterious light spotted in skies over Salt Lake City, Utah.
That's quite a list. A lot of incidents packed into a short period, all linked, according to this report, back to that initial discharge.
Exactly. It paints a picture of escalating connected phenomena.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. The report keeps mentioning piezoelectricity. That's the key, it says. For anyone listening, what exactly is that, and why is it so important here?
Right. Well, the report defines piezoelectricity as basically electricity that you get from pressure and heat building up in solid materials, particularly crystals.
They're crystals, okay.
Yeah, it explains that crystals have this very highly ordered microscopic structure, forms a lattice. And the report gives an example. Ringwoodite says it's the oldest example on Earth.
Ringwoodite, never heard of it.
Well, according to the report, it's this olive green mineral diamond, and it's pretty central to their argument. Apparently, for a long time, it was only found in meteorites.
Only from space.
Until 2014. That's when evidence apparently emerged suggesting it's also present deep inside Earth, in the mantle. We're talking depths of like 410 to 660 kilometers down.
That deep. Wow. And what did finding it down there reveal?
This is the kicker, according to the report. It says this discovery showed that there's an incredible amount of water deep within the Earth, maybe 1 to 3 times the volume of all the world's oceans.
3 times the oceans inside the Earth as liquid?
No, not as liquid. That's the key part. It's in the form of hydroxide ions. So oxygen and hydrogen molecules bound together inside the ringwoodite's crystal structure.
Hydroxide ions.
The report even quotes geochemist Graham Pearson from around that 2014 discovery.
Hmm.
He apparently said, the ringwoodite is 1.5% water present not as a liquid, but as hydroxide ions.
Oxygen and hydrogen molecules bound together. Got it. Now, this is where the report really injects its own interpretation, right? It claims Western scientists are basically terrified of this discovery.
Yeah, it uses strong language. Terrified of this monumental and historic discovery because it supposedly overturns everything they've been taught to believe.
And it doesn't stop there. It connects this to the Bible.
It does. It explicitly suggests this discovery confirms descriptions of the fountains of the deep from the story of Noah's flood. So, yeah, framing a scientific finding as proof for religious texts.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that framing then leads into how the report discusses Earth's core and magnetic field.
Precisely. It brings up differing views. It mentions Professor Alessandro Tasci's theory that iron alone can't explain the magnetic field, maybe needs up to 20% nickel.
Okay, a standard kind of scientific debate.
But then it contrasts that with what it says is the long-held belief of these Russian doctor scientists. Their view, as presented in the report, is that the Earth's magnetic field can only be explained by accepting the fact that water is our planet's largest crystal.
Water, as a planet-sized crystal, generating the magnetic field.
That seems to be the implication of their stance, as reported. Clearly, setting up a clash between that idea and more conventional geology.
Okay, this is where it feels like the report really takes a sharp turn. It's not just about geology anymore. It uses these ideas to challenge, well, pretty much everything about the age of the Earth and evolution.
Yeah, it gets really audacious here. It's basically presenting a whole alternative history of the planet. It starts with the Mount St. Helens eruption back in 1980.
Mount St. Helens.
Right.
How does that fit in?
The report claims that what happened geologically there over the next 37 years or so, it conclusively proved that geological changes we think took billions of years can actually happen in just a few thousand.
So rapid geology.
Rapid geology, which, the report says, lines up perfectly with a biblical timeline.
So they're taking a specific event, Mount St. Helens, and reinterpreting it as evidence for a young Earth. And there's more. The report uses other arguments, too.
Oh yeah, several more. First, it tackles carbon-14 dating.
Radiocarbon dating.
The report claims C14 provides the strongest evidence for creation in a young Earth. It argues C14 decays too fast to date anything older than, say, tens of thousands of years.
Right, that's generally understood.
But then it highlights findings of significant detectable levels of radiocarbon in diamonds. Diamonds that evolutionists, it says, consider 1 or 2 billion years old.
Carbon-14 in billion-year-old diamonds.
That's the claim. And the report says this C14 dates those diamonds to only around 55,000 years old. A massive discrepancy.
Okay, so using C14 to argue against deep time, what's next?
Next up is the moon, specifically the moon's recession.
How the moon's moving away from Earth.
Exactly. It explains, the moon is slowly spiraling outwards because of tidal forces. Then it does the calculation. If the Earth is only, say, 6,000 years old.
The biblical time frame again.
Right. Then the moon would have only moved about 800 feet. But the report claims if the Earth is 4 billion years old, like science says, then going back less than 1.5 billion years, the moon would have been touching the Earth, which it presents as, obviously impossible.
That's definitely a dramatic picture they paint. What other science does it challenge?
Earth's magnetic field again, but this time it's decay.
It's getting weaker.
Right. The report notes the field is decaying quite rapidly. It says secular scientists invented a dynamo model to explain it, but claims that model just doesn't work.
Fails to explain the data.
Yeah, fails to explain the rapid decay, fails to explain rapid reversals in the past, and can't account for magnetic fields on other planets like Neptune or Mercury.
And the report offers an alternative.
It does. It claims a creationist model based on the Genesis flood, effectively, and simply explains the data.
So mainstream model bad, flood model good. Got it. What about fossils? That's usually central to age debates.
Absolutely. It brings up findings of wondrously preserved biological materials, specifically soft tissue in dinosaur bones.
The T-Rex femur, with blood vessels and cells.
That exact example of fossils supposedly over 65 million years old. The report argues that laboratory studies have shown that there is no known way for biological material to last more than thousands of years.
Implying the T-Rex can't be that old.
That's the clear implication, challenging the dating of those fossils directly.
Okay. What else? Does it talk about, like, human history?
It does. Human population growth.
How does that fit a young Earth?
It presents a calculation.
Yeah.
If the human population doubles roughly every 150 years, starting after the flood maybe,
Okay.
then a biblical age of the Earth about 6,000 years is consistent with today's population.
Mm.
But it argues if you start humans even 50,000 years ago, a conservative evolutionary time frame, the number of people becomes staggering, impossibly high. It gives the figure 10 to the 99th power, more than the number of atoms in the universe, it says, making the evolutionary timeline impossible from a population standpoint.
So using math to argue against evolutionary timescales for humans, is there a final piece of geological evidence?
Yes, one more. Bent rock strata.
Layers of rock that are folded.
Exactly. It explains that solid rock usually breaks or cracks if you bend it, unless it's super hot or unless it wasn't fully hardened yet.
Okay, makes sense.
Then it points to places like the Grand Canyon and other locations worldwide showing these massive layers of rock tightly folded but without signs of being heated.
So folded while still soft.
That's the argument, which the report says makes perfect sense to creationists who believe these layers were formed rapidly in the global catastrophic flood. They were laid down quickly, still wet and pliable, then folded.
Right. So pulling all these threads together, Mount St. Helens, C14, the moon, magnetic field, soft tissue, population, bent rocks. The report uses all this to claim that mainstream science about Earth's age and history is basically wrong.
Pretty much. It frames these points as proof that Western science is built on completely discredited myths, designed, it says, to hide the true history of our world. It's a very comprehensive challenge to the standard view.
It really is. Okay, so if the report is rewriting geology and time itself, what does this mean for Atlantis and that ancient crystalline structure it mentioned at the start? You said it places Atlantis somewhere totally different.
That's right. Forget the Atlantic Ocean. The SFMRD scientists, according to this report, assert that Atlantis had never been in the Atlantic Ocean, but was instead located in the middle of what is now the United States.
Middle of the U.S., where?
In the area known today as the Western Interior Seaway, which, was that huge inland sea that covered a lot of central North America way back in the Cretaceous period.
So Atlantis was underwater in the middle of America.
Essentially, yes. An island within that ancient seaway. And the report connects this to Plato's writings.
Plato. How does he fit into the middle of America?
Well, the report cites Plato's dialogues, Timaeus and Crepus. It recounts Plato describing this powerful island nation, larger than Libya and Asia together, located in front of the mouth, which you Greeks call the Pillars of Heracles. That's usually taken to mean the Strait of Gibraltar.
Right, pointing to the Atlantic.
Typically, yes. But the report seems to reinterpret this or focus on other aspects. It recounts Plato's story of the Atlanteans warring against Europe and Libya, being defeated by Athens, and then Atlantis' end.
How did Plato say it ended?
Through violent earthquakes and floods, and then, in a single day and night of misfortune, the island of Atlantis, in like manner, disappeared in the depths of the sea.
Okay. And the report connects this description.
Directly. It states flat out that the violent earthquakes and floods that destroyed Atlantis match exactly those events and timelines described in the Bible relating to Noah's flood.
Wow. So Plato's Atlantis story is the story of Noah's flood, just from a different perspective, and it happened in ancient North America.
That is precisely the connection the report makes.
Yeah.
And from there, it pivots to talk about the survivors, the remnants of the Atlantean people.
Who survived this flood destruction.
Yes. And the report describes these survivors as giants.
Giants again. Okay. Does it offer evidence for these giants?
It cites a whole range of sources, mostly ancient historical records and indigenous oral traditions, particularly from the Americas.
Like what?
For example, writings from the Mayan peoples in Mesoamerica. They supposedly describe figures called the Bacubs, 4 gods who had fled Atlantis before it was destroyed.
Mayan gods linked to Atlantis. Interesting.
Then there are the Choctaw people from the southeastern U.S. Their traditions apparently speak of a race of giants called the Nilo race, who were of wonderful stature and lived in what's now Tennessee.
Nilo race. Okay.
Then the Comanche. The report cites Chief Rolling Thunder from 1857, describing a race of white men 10 feet high and far more rich and powerful, who built cities and forts on mountains.
10 feet high. White giants.
That's the account cited. And the Navajo traditions mention the Sterake people, described as a regal race of white giants with advanced mining tech, who dominated the West, enslaved other tribes, had strongholds everywhere. Eventually, they were either extinguished or went back to the heavens.
Sterake people. Sounds almost like sci-fi.
The descriptions are certainly vivid.
Mm.
Then down in Peru, the Manta people, a chronicle from 1864 by Pedro de Cieza de Leon, details giants landing on the coast near Santa Elena.
Giants in Peru, too.
And back in the U.S., the Paiute people in Nevada. Their oral tradition speaks of red-haired white cannibals about 10 feet tall living near Lovelock Cave.
Red-haired cannibal giants. Okay, that's specific.
It is. The report also briefly mentions records from outside the Americas like 15th century Irish annals, the Annals of Clon MacNoise, describing giants living as pirates. And, of course, the Old Testament.
The Bible.
Yeah, Numbers 13, verses 32-33. It refers to the Nephilim, saying the Israelites saw giants there, descendants of Anak, and felt like grasshoppers next to them, men of great size.
So, drawing on biblical, classical, and indigenous sources to paint this picture of giants connected to a lost Atlantean civilization located in ancient America.
That's the tapestry of the report we used together, yes.
So let's bring this all together then. If Atlantis was in this western interior seaway and its giant survivors spread out, where does the report say Atlantis is now, and how does this connect to current events?
Right. This is the final big claim. Based on all this reasoning, the geology, the history, the giants, the SFMRD doctor scientists, according to the report, have determined that the current location of Atlantis is the Yellowstone volcano caldera.
Yellowstone, the supervolcano, that's Atlantis.
That is their stated conclusion in this document.
And what about all the earthquakes happening at Yellowstone now? Scientists worry about an eruption?
The report has a very different interpretation. It contends that the thousands of earthquakes now occurring, there are not signs of magma moving, not precursors to an eruption.
Then what are they, according to the report?
They are caused by the rising of Atlantis. The ancient structure itself is moving upwards, causing the tremors.
Atlantis is literally rising beneath Yellowstone. That's quite a conclusion.
It is. And the report doesn't end there. It adds one final dramatic warning.
Oh.
It claims that the ancient book of Revelation in the Bible also described this specific event.
Revelation predicted the rising of Atlantis under Yellowstone. Which part?
It cites a specific passage, Revelation chapter 9, the fifth trumpet. Then the fifth angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from heaven to earth, and it was given the key to the pit of the abyss.
The key to the abyss. Okay.
The star opened the pit of the abyss, and smoke rose out of it like the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by the smoke from the pit.
Sounds ominous. Like a volcano, maybe?
And out of the smoke, locusts descended on the earth, and they were given power like that of the scorpions of the earth.
Locusts from the smoke. So the report equates the opening of the abyss and the smoke with the rising of Atlantis Yellowstone and whatever comes next.
That seems to be the final, powerful image and warning the report leaves us with.
Wow. Well, this deep dive really shows how a single document, especially one like this from a military research department, can weave together things you just wouldn't expect. Ancient myths, geology, indigenous history, biblical prophecy, all marshaled to create this really startling narrative that challenges so much accepted knowledge. It's a fascinating example of how different worldviews can interpret the same or similar data in radically different ways.
It really is.
It makes you think, doesn't it? As you sort through all the information bombarding us every day, how do you decide what weight to give claims like these? Claims that fall so far outside the mainstream. What connections might you miss or make if you try looking at the world through a completely different lens for a moment? Something to ponder. Keep asking questions, keep digging, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.